of myself, Tyrone, Francis, Marcus, Kibuani, and Charmaine. And today we're just going to be taking everyone to mobility as a service. And we're going to start off by introducing our high-level EA diagram in order to enhance urban mobility. And thereafter, we'll touch on the as-is and the to-be architecture perspectives, as well as the EA core principles. So cool. We'll start off first with my point, which is digital platform development. So I'll just be going over the business architecture, technology architecture, security architecture, information and application architecture. So starting off, we'll just talk to the platform operations and maintenance, which is the business process. And from a technology architecture perspective, we would utilize a distributed and scalable database solution. And this would also involve making use of network segmentation to ensure that there are proper security protocols and optimize network performance and improve control over the network. We'd also ensure that there be secure data access management and a user-friendly interface for the users to access the application. Moving on to the next business activity, we'd have user account management. And from a technology architecture perspective, we need access management system just to ensure that the right users have the right access at the right levels. And to do this, we need encryption and access controls to ensure that proper security measures are followed. From an information architecture perspective, we need a centralized data repository for information in order to ensure that it's easily accessible throughout the digital platform. And lastly, from an application architecture perspective, authorization logic would be needed to ensure that the user is able to log on and access the correct resources. Then moving on to the trip planning and booking process, we need to leverage a scalable and reliable cloud platform in order to meet the high demands. And from a security architecture perspective, regular security audits and vulnerability assessments will be needed to ensure that we don't have unwarranted attacks on our system. Then moving on to the information architecture perspective, we need data entries for users, service providers, trips, and payment information just to ensure that the correct information is stored and accessible. And then moving on to the application architecture perspective, we essentially need a trip planning and optimization engine tool. Cool. So next, I'll just be going over the multimodal integration. From a business architecture perspective, we need to ensure that there's partnerships with the public transport, private, ride sharing, bike sharing, and autonomous cars. Then from a technology architecture perspective, we would need to leverage of cloud-based applications with a serverless architecture. So this would be done to ensure that we get the most benefit in order to work on the different items and ensure that our system works correctly. Moving on to the application architecture perspective, like mentioned previously, a user-friendly web interface for accessing the application is needed so that users can plan their trips and then make payments and ensure that we have some sort of interface in which the user can use the systems efficiently. Then moving on to an information architecture perspective, we need an interoperable data model design. So this would ensure that we get the best out of our system. Moving on to the security architecture perspective, like we mentioned in the previous point, encryption and AAA incorporation is a key to ensure that we follow best practices and ensure that our customers' data is safe. I've now concluded my part, and I will now hand over to Marcus to take us through the payment integration.
Okay. So under the payment integration, we have we have under our business, we have to align with the business goals under the business architecture. And moving on to the information architecture, we have to note the data flow and exchange, meaning the information for the user accounts, trip booking details, real-time payment authorization requests, or payment confirmation data. And then we're moving on to the application architecture, which is we have to, or our security architecture, which is we have to comply with the standards the relevant security standards for payment processing, such as the PCI DSS, which is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, that will ensure adherence to industry best practices for data protection. Moving on to the application architecture, which we have the user interface and user experience. The payment should be a user-friendly interface for selecting payment methods and entering credentials, clear communication of payment options, fees, and security measures, and real-time feedback on payment status, whether it has been confirmed or rejected. Moving on to the technology architecture, it should be a user-friendly interface. Yes, okay, I think for now, I'll just cover those ones and I'll hand over to my colleague. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. I'm Charmaine. I'll be going through the data analytics and optimization. So for business, we have the value stream where the user will have a personalized trip recommendations. We also have the capability where there is a dynamic pricing for demand management. We also have the business process where there is a feedback-driven service improvement where users can provide feedback in form of surveys. We also have technology. In technology architecture, we have a cloud-based data warehouse for scalable analytics, integration tools, containerized ML models for dynamic pricing. We also have API gateway for secure data and secure data exchange. For the application architecture, we have microservice with analytics integration where there will be trip planning services, API design where there will be secure data access for analytics tools. We also have event streaming for real-time analytics where there will be user interaction data. We also have our information architecture where there is data governance, where there will be an anonymous user data for analytics. We also have standard data standards where there is common format for multi-provider integration. We also have data lineage tracking data, where there's tracking data flow for transparency. And lastly, we have security architecture where there's data encryption at rest and in transit. We also have role-based access control for user data. And lastly, we have security information management, event management for threat detection. And I'll be handing over to Kibuani for accessibility and inclusivity.
Thanks, Charmaine. I'll take you through accessibility and inclusivity. So on the business side, we do have the user data. So this needs to be captured according to accessibility needs, which is the mobility vision. So I'll also speak about the real-time data, which integrate accessibility features of transport options such as ramps, low floor, on the buses, and the dynamic routing to plan journeys according to users' need, accessibility stop, boarding areas, and alternative routes. On the technology side, we can speak about the mobile application, which could incorporate things like text-to-speech up to eye contrast interface, voice command, and not limited to multilingual support, data management platform. We can also make use of AI and machine learning technology. So on the application side, we do have the API management, third-party integration. We can also utilize a layered mobile application architecture. On the data side, we must standardize data format, real-time capturing and text-to-speech functionality, data processing and analytics, and a secure system to store and manage user accessibility data, and so on. So on the security side, we can use a password manager and passwordless logins for those with disability and multi-factor with options for biometrics. So I will conclude that section by saying that integrating accessibility and inclusion into the business model of mobility as a service is not only a legal and ethical imperative, but also a strategy that the business can use that can lead to growth, social impact, and an earned reputation of a company. So now, where are we now? Where are we going? How the transition will happen? So I will speak about the transformation of MaaS as we are. The current system, the landscape is fragmented. The system for ticketing and trips planning and information, it's all fragmented. The issue will be what? Disjoint user experience, lack of data exchange, inconsistency of accessibility. The vision, where are we going? Where is the future? So we want a much more unified platform for integrating all MaaS services. And how will the transition happen? We need to standardize data format, develop APIs, integrate services in phases, and do some pilot testing for a smooth transition before the full deployment. What will be the benefit? Seamless and personalized experience for all users. It's going to increase efficiency, easy integration of new services, and promote accessibility once again for users with disability. Thanks. I'll end to Marcus.
Okay, I'll go through with it. So we're looking at the core enterprise architecture principles. So how it will help, it will be through business IT alignment, where we have to make sure that the business objectives meets the data analytics approach. Also, the standardization encourages the platform's users to use common data formats and protocols, communication protocols. And lastly, the service and privacy, where we have to incorporate strong security best practices into the architecture. So I'll pass on to Marcus to take you through the conformance to established standards.
Okay, under the conformance to established standards, by using the TOGAF principles, they will be able to help define the architecture of the mobility as a service platform and the data management standards, which will adhere to data management guidelines, such as those established by the Open Data Institute to guarantee data uniformity, quality, and accessibility for analytics on all platforms. Thank you. I'll hand over to my colleague now.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Marcus. So just to close this off, from a conclusion perspective, we've just gone over our high-level EA diagram depicting the different architectures going on from your business all the way to information architecture. And we've come to the conclusion that mobility as a service architecture transformation would create a more user-friendly, efficient, and inclusive transport system for the future. And it would have an emphasis on improved accessibility and user experience. So along the path, we've also discussed the as is and the to be, as well as the transition states and the core EA principles. And yeah, I think that just wraps it up for today. Thanks, everyone.